May the 25th. Okay, pardon me. Yeah, all right, pardon me.
But if you're looking at the INMSHA chart, then I see what you're saying, but I didn't think we were...
No. Thank you for the correction. At any rate, the Sun conjunct Venus deals with possessions and real estate and ownership, okay? And because, even though it's not in Taurus, I'm referring to the aspect here, right? The Sun conjunct Venus, right, represents certain holdings or financial holdings or ownership or real estate and finances, right? And this opposes or actually it quincunxes which is an aspect of 150 degrees, which deals with other people's properties and shared resources, all right? He had a quincunx to Saturn with this regard. And when the tension between him and Elijah Muhammad occurred, because the quincunx can represent tension as well, right? They took his house from him. They took him to court, which is Venus, to take his home, his real estate, his possession, which is Venus. So there goes another natal promise when we deal with the biography of Malcolm X, right? Because I want to stay with the theme of the natal promise, right?
Well, have you spoken on the murderous degree in this already? Because I know I came late to the show.
Yeah, I spoke on it, but you can elaborate on it too.
I like to elaborate on it because it's something it shook me for a long time. When I first met Rock, and I started to study COZMOPHYZIX seriously, one of the first things that ever popped out to me is that I had Mars and Pluto very near each other, within degrees and they form a relationship called a conjunction. So that means that these energies are kind of like meshed together. And when I realized that it was in Malcolm X's and it was in Martin's chart and a few others people's charts, it really I believe the chart was Kennedy I was looking at. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly, but these people's charts, and I realized, and I started doing research on all these famous leaders who were killed with this aspect called the murder degree. I got very, very shook, and to the point where we had a conversation where me and Rob were driving to Baltimore, and I was pretty much almost like I wasn't even going to study anymore. I wasn't going to try to teach this at all because I felt that if I did so, it was within my natal promise to be killed as well, in front of my partner. By government officials, actually. And so I got serious into this and started looking into research and seeing that people born with Mars and Pluto conjunct or near each other do experience with that so-called murder degree. Now, they may not die, but these are people who attempts on their lives are done, or people who murder or attempt to take others' lives themselves too. And I was shot in my head on two separate occasions, and I have this murderous degree near my ascendant, with Mars being in Virgo and Pluto being in Libra, and I was shot in the head by a person who was a dear friend of mine at the time. The first time around, and the second time around, it was over my partner. And I'm just showing, relating to how that relates to me and how it was very important that I looked at this because it shook me to the core. And I thought that, if I try to be a revolutionary person and teach this science to people and go out and tell people what was really stolen from us and how to enlighten themselves, that I would be red dot. And so if you are my friend on Facebook, you often hear me say, yes, I am the president and the CEO of the Red Dot Club. I had to get over that obstacle, but I realized that as I did, okay, and Mars is courage. And so I had to be courageous and be transformed in order to learn this science and be able to perpetuate it the way I do now. So I noticed that in Martin's chart. I noticed that in Malcolm X chart. But here's a funny thing. Do you know who else's chart I noticed that in?
Who?
I noticed also the relationship that Mars and Pluto formed in Noble Drew Ali's chart.
Ah. Okay. Elaborate.
All right. Now,
Hold on.
normally,
Hold on. He was born January 8th, what year? 23?
I
No,
believe
not 23. He was born before
1886.
1886. All right, very well. Let's see that.
Cherokee Indian Reservation, North Carolina.
Okay. I'm not going to be able to locate it, but I'm looking at the aspect between Mars and Pluto in Noble Drelly's chart, and it forms a square by sign, a trine by numeric value.
Right. And we're talking about how Mars and Pluto, what we call the murderous degree, when they form a square or an opposition or conjunction in the natal promise, what it promises is a challenge to one's life that will transform them. And if they're courageous and survive it through that carriage and then survive this transformation, how they transform into these ultra personalities. You know, myself, I transformed to who I call myself now, Everese, from the person that I was before. And believe me, it's a totally transformative personality that I display now in life than I did before. I noticed that when we talk about Noble Drew Ali, he was in prison, and then when he came out from prison, he's supposed to have was killed. And we did a lot of investigation and studying on this, and since people really don't know what happened to him, but we know he was in the police custody, which is Mars. We know that the police did rough him up, and so what I found, because it lies in the ascendant, right on the ascendant, but in the 12th house, and the 12th house also represents prisons, everyone, okay? That square, he was killed in prison by the police over the things that he was saying and teaching. And so we found this in his chart as well, this murder degree. And so now when you look at all these famous people, you see how this Mars-Pluto conjunct in their charts, it leads you to concern to how they, live their life and how they were transformed by these things and how these things work out. And then you can see it in your chart. You can see it in manifested in other people's chart. We can look at, as well, we can look at Kennedy's chart, JFK's chart.
He had a quincunx.
Right, and they quincunx there. You understand? But they quincunx, but Saturn also forms a relationship to Mars in that chart. And when Saturn is involved in the quincunx, it's usually very stressful as well. And so we're looking at all these different aspects that are being consistent throughout the charts of famous people, just so people in themselves can look and see what that brings. There was a chart you did for a young lady, and it had Mars and Pluto conjunct in it. And I remember you warning a young lady, about her relationship, and then what you said came true. Go ahead and explain that. I would like for people to hear that story.
Yeah, believe me, that was my intention when you went into it, but I wanted you to finish your dissertation. For all intents and purposes, I'm not going to mention her name, okay? And for all intents and purposes of privacy, because I don't have her consent, I'm not going to mention the location or where she was born, nor the location where the event took place, okay? This was a young lady. She was a client of mine for about 2 years. I met her in the year 2000, all right, in the month of March, right? And I read her chart. She had Neptune in the first house, which is a promise. It's a natal promise of spirituality. People who are born with Neptune in the first house, I can guarantee you that the older they get, the more religious they become, the more spiritual they become. If it's not religion on an orthodox level, it's religion in terms of their spirituality. They will implement their spiritual beliefs religiously, okay? For those of you who know the difference in those terms, and to get into a definition of what those terms are, it's too lengthy. Just start to investigate the difference, and you'll understand where I'm coming from. But anyway, she's a very spiritual individual. She was a regular client of mine for 2 years. She rescinded from her belief in astrology, not because the events that I gave her to read, that I read to her didn't come true, but simply because of that. She adopted the doctrine of what do they call that? The laws of attraction. She adopted this into her life philosophy, and she said to me, you know, the planets are there, they are material. They are physical realities, and human beings are not physical reality enmeshed entirely. They're physical and they're real in terms of their experience there, but they're also spiritual and unreal. They have the ability to take the unreal, which is your thoughts, your aspirations, and to make them a reality. She said, so I'm not even going to dwell on astrology anymore, so don't be mad at me if I don't call you anymore and buy readings from you, basically, what she said. When she said that, I said, very well. I said, but before you go, this was in 2005 that I told her this, right? I said, before you go, you realize that in your desire to overcome the material laws that you are subjected to, and to induct your spiritual law and your spiritual beliefs, that you are both. You are both evenly mixed. Every human being is as much a spirit on this planet as they are a physical being. So when you begin to think that your spirituality will provide you the ultimate relief from your physical condition, you're mistaken, because you only have a spiritual existence on this planet because you're a physical existence. She said, all right, whatever. So, in 2007, I called her, because I still had her number. I called her, and I asked her about the state of her relationship. And she asked me why I would inquire as such. So I said, you should be getting into a new relationship now, and this relationship will be fruitful for about a year and a half, a year and 3/4. I said, after a year and 3/4, which is like 15 months, right? 16 months. I said, you're going to run into a challenge in this relationship, and I would advise you now not to engage in it. She said, I told you a couple years ago, which was, about 18 months before I called it, that I no longer deal with the idea that astrology